There is a specific kind of military problem that no amount of carrier groups can solve. Not because the carrier groups are not powerful, they are. Not because the American Navy is not the most technologically sophisticated in the world. It is. But because the problem is not one of power, it is one of geometry. And this week, Iran deployed the weapon that exploits that geometry in the most dangerous waterway on Earth. Here is what happened. Iran's Navy commander, Rear Admiral Shahram Irani, confirmed publicly that Iranian submarine forces have been deployed in the Strait of Hormuz. Not one submarine, a fleet. Positioned in the waterway through which 20% of the world's oil was supposed to flow. Sitting on the ocean floor, silent, with their systems off, invisible to the sonar of every American destroyer currently operating in the region. Let that land for a second. I want to walk you through today exactly what Iran deployed, exactly why American sonar cannot reliably find it, and exactly why the geometry of the Strait of Hormuz turns a fleet of small, cheap submarines into one of the most effective anti-access weapons in modern naval warfare. Stay with me. There are three things I want you to understand. The first is what the Gadir-class submarine actually is, and why its specific design characteristics make it almost undetectable in the exact environment where it has just been deployed. The second is the cost asymmetry that makes this deployment a structural problem rather than a tactical one. The third is what all of this means for the American naval position in the Gulf and for the oil price that is currently at your gas station. Once you see all three clearly, you will understand why Iran's submarine deployment this week changed the operational calculus in the Strait of Hormuz more fundamentally than any missile salvo has. Let me start with what Iran actually deployed because the coverage has been treating it as a symbolic gesture and missing the technical reality entirely. The Gadir-class submarine is 29 meters long and displaces between 115 and 150 tons when submerged. To put that in context, a Virginia-class American nuclear attack submarine displaces almost 8,000 tons. The Gadir is in naval terms roughly equivalent to a motorcycle next to a freight truck. In open ocean warfare, this comparison is entirely accurate. The Gadir would be irrelevant against an American carrier strike group in deep water. It does not have the range, the endurance, or the weapons payload to pose a serious threat in a conventional blue water engagement. But the Strait of Hormuz is not open ocean. At its narrowest point, it is 33 kilometers wide. The navigable channel used by large commercial vessels and naval ships is significantly narrower than that. Perhaps 10 to 15 kilometers of practical deep water transit corridor. A Gadir-class submarine with a torpedo range of 10 kilometers is not facing an open ocean targeting problem. It is essentially pre-positioned within engagement range of anything transiting the channel simply by existing in the strait. This is the geometry that makes the Gadir terrifying in this specific environment. It was not designed for blue water warfare. It was designed for exactly this scenario: shallow, confined, acoustically complex coastal waters, where its small size and low noise signature give it advantages that a Virginia-class submarine does not have. Here is the specific technical problem for American sonar operators. The Gadir can power down to minimum systems and sit on the ocean floor. When it does this, it becomes acoustically indistinguishable from the bottom. Standard hull-mounted sonar on American destroyers is specifically challenged by shallow water environments where warm surface layers create thermoclines that deflect sonar signals. Variable depth sonar systems can partially compensate for this, but require the detecting vessel to slow down, become predictable, and create its own acoustic signature in the process. Add to this the background noise environment. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the busiest commercial waterways on Earth, or was before the closure. The ambient noise from shipping, from the geological structure of the seabed, from the temperature gradients created by the Gulf's shallow warm water, all of this creates a detection environment that is significantly more difficult than anything American anti-submarine warfare systems were optimized for during the Cold War, when the priority was detecting large Soviet submarines in the deep Atlantic. Iran has between 20 and 23 operational Gadir submarines. Even if American forces can locate and track some of them some of the time, they cannot locate and track all of them all of the time. And in a waterway 33 kilometers wide, where 10 kilometers is the torpedo engagement range, you do not need to track all of them. You need to track none of them to deny transit. Now let me give you the cost math, because this is the dimension that the coverage consistently misses, and that the source material in these videos has identified as the most structurally important dimension of this conflict. A Gadir-class submarine costs Iran approximately several $1,000,000 to build. The Iranian defense industry has been manufacturing them for over a decade under sanctions with domestically produced components. Iran has between 20 and 23 operational units. The total investment in the Gadir fleet is a fraction of what a single American destroyer costs to build and operate. A single Mark 48 torpedo that an American submarine would use to destroy a Gadir costs approximately $3.5 million. The Gadir itself costs less than that to manufacture. You cannot economically destroy a Gadir fleet by shooting at it with torpedoes that cost more than the submarines being targeted. The Patriot interceptor that America uses to shoot down Iranian drones costs between $3 million and $6 million per intercept. The Shahed drone it intercepts costs $20,000 to manufacture. That asymmetry has been documented throughout this conflict. The submarine asymmetry is even more extreme. A $3 million torpedo versus a submarine that costs less than $3 million to build. The math favors the defender, but the most important asymmetry is not the cost of destroying the submarines. It is the cost of the uncertainty they create. A destroyer transiting the Strait of Hormuz when there are confirmed Iranian submarines in the strait cannot transit at normal speed. It must slow down to allow sonar to operate. It must conduct active anti-submarine warfare procedures that announce its own position to everything in the water. It must accept a degraded operational tempo for the duration of the transit. And it must accept the fundamental reality that no anti-submarine procedure guarantees detection of a powered-down Gadir sitting on the ocean floor in 30 meters of water. That uncertainty is the weapon, not the torpedoes, the uncertainty. Now let me tell you what this means for the broader operational picture. Iran's submarine deployment came at a specific moment. It came after the ceasefire period during which Iran was publicly negotiating through Pakistani intermediaries. It came after American destroyers attempted to transit the strait and were attacked. It came after Iran publicly announced a zero-tolerance policy toward any vessel attempting unauthorized crossing. The timing is not accidental. Iran spent the ceasefire period doing two things simultaneously: negotiating at the table in Islamabad and repositioning its military assets for the next phase of the conflict. The submarines that are now on the ocean floor of the Strait of Hormuz were not deployed overnight. The positioning requires preparation. It requires coordination between submarine commanders, surface units, mine-laying operations, and shore-based anti-ship missile batteries. The ceasefire was the operational window. American military planners are now facing a layered anti-access environment in the Strait of Hormuz that is more complex than at any point in the history of this waterway. Surface mines that Iran itself admits it has lost track of. Fast attack boats capable of saturation tactics. Shore-based anti-ship missiles with ranges that cover the entire strait. Anti-aircraft capabilities that have improved during the ceasefire period. And now confirmed submarine deployment in the navigable channel. Each layer individually is manageable. Together, they create an operational environment where transit carries risks that were not present 3 months ago and that cannot be eliminated by force alone. Let me connect this to what it means for you watching this in the United States. The Strait of Hormuz submarine deployment does not close the strait further than it is already closed. What it does is raise the cost of reopening it. Every additional defensive layer Iran adds to the strait raises the American military and human cost of a forced reopening. Every layer that raises that cost extends the timeline before normal commercial transit can resume. Every week that normal commercial transit does not resume, the oil price that is above $100 per barrel stays above $100 per barrel, your gas price. Your grocery bill, your heating costs this winter. your Federal Reserve that cannot cut interest rates while inflation is structurally elevated by energy prices. All of these are connected to a 33-kilometer waterway where Iran just sat 20 submarines on the ocean floor. There is a historical parallel for this moment that is worth understanding. In 1982, Argentina deployed submarines in the waters around the Falkland Islands during its conflict with Britain. The threat posed by a single Argentine submarine, the ARA San Luis, diverted enormous British naval resources throughout the conflict. The San Luis fired torpedoes that failed to detonate due to mechanical problems, an accident of fortune that may have saved British ships. The mere presence of confirmed enemy submarines in contested waters forces defensive resource allocation that degrades offensive capability. Iran has deployed not one submarine, but an estimated fleet in a waterway that is 33 kilometers wide. The deterrence effect, the uncertainty tax imposed on every vessel that wants to transit, does not require a single torpedo to be fired. Watch two signals in the next 30 days. First, whether any American or Allied vessel attempts a transit of the Strait of Hormuz and what the operational outcome is. A successful transit under fire means the submarine deployment has not achieved tactical deterrence. A deterred transit means the geometry has worked as Iran designed it. Second, whether oil prices respond to the submarine announcement with another step up. If energy markets price in the submarine deployment as a further constraint on transit timeline, you will see it at the pump within 2 weeks. Tell me in the comments, do you think the United States has the anti-submarine capability to effectively counter a fleet of Gadirs on the ocean floor of a 33-kilometer strait? I read every comment. The people around you are watching the missile and drone footage. They are missing the submarines on the ocean floor. The ones that don't need to fire to change the operational mathematics of this conflict. Share this with one person who thinks America's naval superiority means the strait can be reopened whenever Washington decides. Because 20 submarines sitting silent on the ocean floor have a different opinion. This is the analysis that matters, and we will be here for every chapter of what comes next.